Carper.
Thank you. Thank you both. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. Tell me where you're from, both of you.
I'm from Rollingford, Mississippi.
I would have guessed Boston, but okay. And how about you, sir?
Pardon, sir?
Yeah, where are you from?
Barrow, Alaska, top of the world, as far north as you can go in the United States.
Okay. Who would you say is your favorite senator?
Pardon?
Who's your favorite U.S. senator from Alaska?
Senator?
You got a couple of good ones. You got a couple of good ones. Well, let me just say to our chair and ranking member, thanks for convening this this hearing today, and we thank both of you for joining us. I think we have a couple of other witnesses apparently going to come as well. Today, I believe, is the first Senate Environment and Public Works Committee hearing in almost 15 years on the subject of environmental justice. First one. And the first since the subcommittee has been renamed to include the words environmental justice in it. But as we all know, this topic and the need for government to address it is far from new. And for decades, minority communities and low-income Americans have shouldered much of the burden from pollution and other environmental problems that impact our nation. It's often hard to illustrate the enormity of a problem such as this, but there's one statistic that stands out in my mind, and that's a report last year that found that 70% of the nation's most environmentally contaminated sites are located within just 1 mile of federally assisted housing. Think about that. 70% of our nation's most contaminated sites are all located within 1 mile of federally assisted housing. That's just one drop in the bucket, one funding of myriad more that all paint the same picture, crystal clear. We're long overdue for a reckoning here. Yeah. So when we say environmental justice, it's not a buzzword or talking point. Environmental justice means that we have a moral obligation to put justice and fairness at the forefront of all the work that we do. When I talk about environmental justice, I say it's another way of saying golden rule, treat other people the way we want to be treated. But this has to be a top priority for all of us, Democrats, Republicans, Independents. I could speak for myself to say that's certainly the case as I approach our work on this committee, from which I'm privileged to chair, and through the Environmental Justice Caucus, which I co-founded with our colleagues, Senator Duckworth and Senator Booker. So I'm pleased that our committee is leading by example. In April, our committee led Senate passage of the Bipartisan Drinking Water and Wastewater Infrastructure Act by a margin of 89-2. We don't do many things around here by 89-2, but it's a huge, huge vote. And our legislation makes overdue investments in our nation's water infrastructure so that our most vulnerable communities would have access to reliable, clean water and the means to pay for it. One part of our bill that I'm especially proud of, 40% of the funds in the legislation are designated to go to underserved, rural and tribal communities, including communities in Alaska. This funding will be crucial in helping disadvantaged communities make necessary upgrades and to ensure families access to clean water and a healthier, brighter future for their kids. And with measures like this, we can start to do right by our neighbors and help those most in need, whether they're neighbors around the street, around the block, across the town, another community or the county, but those are our neighbors too. Through the American Rescue Plan, we need to set aside $50 million for environmental justice grants. We also set aside some $50 million for environmental justice grants at the EPA and another $50 million to improve air quality monitoring for our communities most threatened by dangerous air pollutants. Now, as this body is in the final sprint working on expansive legislation to invest in our nation's infrastructure and economy, we must keep our focus on this core principle of fairness to fulfill the moral obligation to lift those in greatest need and pursue justice in all that we do. This is especially true when it comes to providing a nurturing environment so critical to livelihoods and prospects for generations to come. We must make sure that we're working to create a better future for all of our neighbors, whether they live, again, in our community or in some other community or across the town. But that's why I'm pleased we're having this hearing and discussion that explores this important issue. We thank you for coming today. Now, a long wind-up for a short question. In your testimony, you mentioned that you wrote a book about how rural communities have traditionally been denied access to sustainable and resilient infrastructure. With natural disasters and extreme weather events on the rise, investing in these communities as well as other communities that have suffered from historic disinvestment will become even more important. Here's the question. How can the federal government help environmental justice communities prepare for climate change and its effect?
Is this for Senator, is this for Ms. Flowers?
This is from Ms. Flowers.
Ms. Flowers is online, and so we'll,
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that question. I think the way the federal government could help environmental justice communities adjust to climate change is to pass the American Jobs Plan. I think that it is a start in making sure that 40% of those investments are going to those communities that are frontline communities that are most overburdened. And I think we've seen some examples of that today with the other witnesses. So I support that effort. I was just in a community where people are dealing with raw sewage running into their homes for over 20 years. But I think this is the first time that I've heard, since I've been doing this work, an effort to try to address this in all of America, but certainly in rural communities.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you for that response, Ms. Flowers. Can I just mention the question for the record, and we'll ask our witnesses just to respond for the record. But the question would be, please tell us more. This is for Mr. Pulido, Ms. Pulido, Laura Pulido. Here's a question. Please tell us more about how threats to water access impact environmental justice communities, especially those in rural areas, and how does this threat compare to the threats from cumulative pollution releases that you mentioned in your testimony? That's my question, and we'll just ask you to respond to the question for the record. Again, our thanks to all of you for testifying today and for holding this hearing and let me participate.
thank you very much.